Okay. Psychotic disorders specific to mood disorders. We are in your 7th edition, chapter 27. For mood disorders, as we talk about them, there are two major categories of mood disorder. Obviously, this first kitty cat is not having a bad day, but I can't say the same for the second kitty cat. He is not having a good day. Our two major categories are depressive and bipolar disorders. Mood is an emotion that has a major influence on one's perception of the world. Would you say that's true? Whatever mood you're in has a lot to do with how you get along with your environment, other people, everything, right? What you watch on TV, what you say about what you watch on TV. If you're in a bad mood, everybody's stupid, right? Okay. Mood is also called the affect, which is the emotional reaction associated with the experience. So you have an experience, and then the emotional reaction to that experience is called mood. Some things will put you in a good mood, happy cat. Some things will put you in a bad mood, cat with a melon on his head. So what are some of the examples of someone's mood? How can you tell someone's mood, and what would you describe? What is the look? Sadness, yeah. Joy, happiness. How about anger? Anxiety. I don't know if rudeness can be an emotion. It's just an attribute. So as we move on to talk about it, the definition of a mood disorder. First of all, I think to understand it, you really have to understand what is a mood disorder. Well, it's a disturbance in mood characterized by a full or partial manic or depressive symptom that can't be because of something else. We all have our good days. We all have our bad days, right? We have feelings of sadness, inappropriate situations. Feelings of sadness are common. Everybody experiences them. And they're expected among those who are healthy. Just because you get sad over an experience does not make you an unhealthy person. They're expected in healthy people. It is only responding normally to your everyday disappointments of life, right? Okay. We know what we need to do to cope. We know what is okay for us. We got a pretty good idea of what we can handle and when to, say that's all I can do. And we know when those days are overwhelming, what we do to help us get back on track. Our feelings of sadness cause us to adjust and to cope. And whatever works for us puts us back into control of our emotions. And sometimes it takes us a small amount of time to become in control, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get back into control. But it's that control that we do seek for, and we do find that is healthy. When our ability to do this becomes a problem, the ability to control our emotions, that's when we're unable to bring ourselves back to the center, back to where we were. And we may suffer from some degree of a mood disorder when we are no longer in control of our emotion. We'll begin talking about depressive disorders, and we'll save the bipolar disorders for later on. When we talk about the mood disorder depressive, you're talking about major depressive disorder and dysthymic disorder. These are the two diagnoses of mood disorder that are characterized as depressive forms of mood. Both dysthymic and major depressive disorder are depressive forms of mood. So the first category of mood disorders we're going to talk a little bit about is major depressive disorder. Now, you may not have suffered from a major depressive disorder, but you probably know someone who has or is taking medicines for depression or something. I say that because depression, this alteration in mood, affects 6.4% of the population 18 and older within the last year. And it has affected even more than that as we go along. Depression is often referred to as the common cold of psychiatric disorders because it's so prevalent. Depression is generally higher among younger women and then decreases with age. And it's the opposite for men. Depression is usually lower among our younger men and then increases with age. Depression is an alteration in mood that is usually exhibited by verbalizations of feeling sad, feeling despair, hopelessness, being very negative or pessimistic. It is these feelings that usually result in a loss of interest in the person's usual activities. Somatic symptoms may or may not be present. We talked about what that is to lose joy in previously enjoyed activities, anhedonia, right? Somatic symptoms, when they just have ailments and body aches or pains that can't be justified by medical tests. So sometimes those are associated with major depressive disorders. Depression itself is commonly associated with changes in sleep patterns and appetite. And I say changes because the changes are different for everyone. Someone experiencing depression might sleep a lot more, whereas someone else experiencing depression may have difficulty sleeping. An appetite, maybe someone who's feeling depressed may eat more, and someone who's feeling depressed may not eat as much. So I just say changes rather than increase or decrease because it isn't one or the other. Depression affects 10% of the population. Women, 25% of all women in a lifetime will be affected by depression. And men, 13% in a lifetime will become clinically depressed. This is your diagnostic criteria related to the DSM for someone to be classified or categorized or diagnosed with major depressive disorder. The essential features here listed on the slide. I think that's on page 559, 27-1 table. 5 or more of these identifiers must be present for at least 2 weeks, and it has to be a significant change from the previous level of functioning. So if you've got 5 of any of these 9 indicators that last for at least 2 weeks and is a significant change, it's possible that you could be diagnosed with major depressive disorder. One of the 5, however, must be either the depressed mood or the loss of interest or pleasure. You got to have one of those and then 4 others. They usually exhibit significant weight losses or gains even when they are not trying to lose weight or gain weight. They have a change of, usually, for your major depressed patients, 5% of body weight in 1 month. For someone clinically depressed, that change in appetite, remember I said it could be more or less, but we gauge it by saying it's usually 5% change of body weight within a month's time. Whether they experience insomnia or hypersomnia, they have a change in their sleep, and they have that same change nearly every day. Either they can't sleep, and it happens every day. They cannot sleep. They are up all night. Or they have the hypersomnolence, and they sleep every day, all day. The psychomotor agitation or psychomotor retardation that is observed by others, not just the patient's subjective feelings. Someone has to see that psychomotor agitation or retardation. It can't just be the patient saying, I can't sit still, I got all this nervous energy, or I can't get up, I can't do anything. Others have to corroborate that and say, you know, she just sits in the same chair all day, every day. I observe this, and she has no motivation to move. So the psychomotor agitation or retardation has to be observable, has to be seen by other people, not just the patient's account of it. Those feelings of fatigue, loss of energy, that's a daily problem for this patient. Feelings of worthlessness and guilt. It may be delusional, it may be excessive and inappropriate feelings of worthlessness and guilt. And it's not just about being sick, not just about being depressed, not just about having these symptoms of depression and sadness and feeling not worthy. It may be feeling worthless in every area of their life. Worthless at work, I'm guilty about how bad I am as a parent, or the obligations that I have at church that I can't fulfill. It's a lot of different areas. They just feel generally worthless and guilty about not being able to do all these things. They have a decreased ability to concentrate or to make decisions. This happens on a daily basis. This can be either observed by others or purely subjective on the patient's part. They have thoughts of death that recur. Not just the fear of dying, not just the typical wondering about the afterlife and, those decisions, but this is thoughts of death that recur. Recurrent suicidal ideations, thinking about ending their own life. They may or may not have a plan in place. It's just that they think about it a lot. Or they may exhibit recurrent suicide attempts. They may actually try to take their life more than once. They may have recurrent specific suicide plans that they can tell you in detail. When their depression worsens, they have this suicidal plan in place, and they have every detail mapped out to perfection. Now, for someone to be diagnosed under this criteria with major depressive disorder, there can be no history of ever having had a manic or a hypomanic period or episode. If they've ever had a diagnosed or an observed period of mania or hypomania, they cannot fall under major depressive disorder. Write that down. There can be no history of ever having a manic or a hypomanic episode and be diagnosed with major depressive disorder. They can never have been manic or hypomanic. Or they cannot have had a period where they were depressed and manic, a mixture of hyperactivity and depression. They can't have any of that hyperactivity, that mania, those manic episodes at all. To be diagnosed with major depressive disorder, it cannot be because of a medical condition, just like all the others that we've been talking about, such as hypothyroidism. Someone with hypothyroidism may experience depression, but it wouldn't be major depressive disorder. If we can fix the hypothyroidism, then the depression will clear, right?
Would that be the same thing like brain injury? They usually have major.
Any medical condition that can cause depression would not be a true major depressive disorder. It would be caused by whatever it is. A substance abuse effect. We talked about a lot of drugs that can cause depression. If they're experiencing depression when they're using or because they're using, it may not be major depressive disorder. If they have symptoms that cause severe distress and impairment of social or occupational areas of functioning associated with their depression, it goes with them in every area of their life. They're not just depressed at home. They're depressed all day, every day. And the depression that they are experiencing is not because of something logical, like the death of a loved one. We expect there to be episodes of real heartfelt depression when you lose someone very close to you. that's probably not major depressive disorder. That's what we expect someone to experience in the grieving process. As far as diagnosing someone, there are further classifications of how we can assign a diagnosis to someone who has major depressive disorder. Single episode is used for a patient who's now having or has just had their first episode or has just gotten a new diagnosis of major depression. So that's someone who's had a single episode, only one. They just had it, they just got their diagnosis, single episode. Recurrent episode or recurrent diagnosis is used when the patient has their second or more episodes of depression. So you have single and recur. Mild, moderate, or severe, these are the categories that are used to identify the number of those identifiers, the 9 identifiers that I said we had to have, 5 of, and one of them had to be the mood disorder or, okay, well, if they have 8 of them, they're going to be more severe than someone who has 5, who might have a milder case. Does that make sense? You're looking at how many of those 9 identifiers does the patient actually have to say whether they're having mild, moderate, or severe major depression. We're also going to look at the severity of the client's depressive symptoms in how many areas are they having problem. Personal, social, occupational. Looking at whether or not they are manifesting their symptoms in hypersomnolence, they sleep all day long, or do they manifest their symptoms by cutting themselves? Those are different as far as they are mild, moderate, or severe. Someone who sleeps all day long because they are so depressed has much less of a form of depressive disorder than someone who experiences depression to the point that they cut themselves repeatedly. Not that depression is not depression is not depression. We're just looking at whether it's mild, moderate, or more severe. Psychotic features. Major depressive disorder with psychotic features is when it is evident that the patient is experiencing impairment from reality. They're having those hallucinations, they're so depressed they're delusional, or they're having illusions associated with their depression. So they're depressed with psychotic features. Catatonic features identifies the presence of psychomotor disturbances, either that psychomotor agitation or that psychomotor retardation that we talked about. Those are the catatonic features. They may or may not have that waxy flexibility that we discussed. And they may or may not have excessive motor activity, be able to sit down for long periods of time or not be able to sit down at all. They can have any of those catatonic features. They may experience those negative symptoms that we talked about that go with schizophrenia. They may have mutism and just be so depressed that they don't talk. Someone in major depressive disorder can also experience echolalia or echopraxia. They can have melancholic features. Melancholic features is a severe form of major depressive disorder. The symptoms of this disorder are very exaggerated. Their reaction to pleasurable stimuli is absent. They don't find pleasure in any daily activity or anyone in their daily activities. Historically, there has been a very good response for someone with melancholic features in major depressive disorder to antidepressants or other treatments for the symptoms of depression so that we can lessen the severity. Because as I said, melancholic features is a severe form of major depression. And chronic, the next one on the slide is chronic. Chronic is the current level of symptoms that have been consistently present for 2 years. If they have the same level of symptoms that they are telling you today or that are manifested today or that you can observe today, and they've had them present for 2 years, it's said to be chronic major depressive disorder. There are such things as a seasonal pattern to depression. It is called seasonal affective disorder, appropriately acronymed SAD. Seasonal affective disorder indicates that the client experiences their depressive symptoms at the same time every year. Some of your seasonal affective disorders fall in the winter or fall months, and some of your seasonal affective disorders can fall any time of the year. They don't always have to fall in the fall and winter, but typically and statistically, depressive disorders that fall at the same time every year do tend to come in the fall and winter months. Postpartum onset or postpartum depression. This is the depressive symptoms that is very specific. It is used when the symptoms of major depression occur within 4 weeks after delivery. It is said to be postpartum depression when the symptoms of major depressive disorder occur within 4 weeks after delivery. So, if your patient that you're assigned to has the diagnosis on Axis 1 of major depressive disorder, recurrent, severe, with psychotic features, every bit of that should mean something to you. What does it mean? Number 1, major depressive disorder means they have a mood disorder, right? Number 2, recurrent means this ain't the first time either. They've had at least 2 or more. Number 3, it says severe. This means that they have to have at least more than 5 of those identifiers, because they have to have 5 to have major depressive disorder. So if it's severe, I'm thinking they've got 6, 7, 8 of those identifiers. And with psychotic features means that their level of reality is impaired. They're experiencing some kind of psychosis with their depression. So just from reading that diagnosis, you should get some understanding of this patient. They have a mood disorder. They've suffered for a while. This ain't the first time they've been hospitalized. It's pretty severe. They have a lot of those indicators going on. And they have some psychotic features. They're hallucinating or they're delusional or something. You know that before you ever meet the patient. Dysthymic disorder. That was the second category of mood disorders. Your dysthymic disorder is a depressed mood with 2 or more of the following on the slide. They used to classify it as onset, whether or not it was before the age of 21 or after the age of 21. You don't see that so much anymore. That was early onset when the symptoms began of dysthymic disorder before 21, and it was said to have a late onset when it started after 21. The characteristics of dysthymic disorder are very similar to the mild symptoms of major depressive disorder. It's not hardly up to major depressive disorder, but they're similar. Can you see the similarities? The poor appetite or the overeating, the insomnia or the hypersomnia, low energy and fatigue, low self-esteem, poor concentration, hopelessness. Not quite major depressive disorder, but close. Close enough to be dysthymic, but not far enough to be major depressive disorder. It is this depressed mood that lasts most of the day, more days than not. And this happens for at least 2 years in your adult and 1 year in your adolescent to get dysthymia disorder diagnosis. They have to have 2 of these identifiers listed on the slide at the same time that they have obvious depression. They're obviously depressed and they have 2 of these things going on. Can classify them with a dysthymic disorder diagnosis. No major depressive disorders during the first 2 years or 1 year of the behaviors for adolescents. They can't have any major depressive disorders. They can't fall into that major depressive category and then be classified as dysthymic disorder if they've already had major depressive disorder. within the first 2 years of the behaviors for adults, or within the first year of the behaviors for adolescents. Yes?
Is it only in the major depression that they have 1 and 2 always, or is it both of them?
1 and 2 always, what do you mean?
Diagnostic criteria.
Well, for major depressive disorder, they have to have 5 of the 9, and out of those 5, 1 of them has to be, I have to look back. 1 of them has to be either depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure. And that's major depressive disorder specifically. And then as we move into classifying them for dysthymic disorder, they have to appear depressed, be observed as depressed, and have 2 of the following on the slide. And they can never have had major depression while they were having this for the first 2 years for an adult and the first year for an adolescent. Does that help? Okay. Also, to be diagnosed with dysthymic disorder, there can be no history of ever having had manic, hypomanic, or a mixture of manic symptoms either. Can't be major depressive disorder or dysthymic disorder if they've ever had a manic episode or a hypomanic episode or a period of mixed episodes where they're kind of depressed and manic. Also jot this down. They can have no history of cyclothymic disorder. We haven't discussed cyclothymic yet, but we will. Probably not today, but we will. So if they've had cyclothymic disorder, they can't be dysthymic. C-Y-C-L-O-T-H-Y-M-I-C. That's another disorder. So if they've ever been diagnosed with cyclothymic disorder, they can't have dysthymic disorder. Someone with a dysthymic disorder diagnosis has no evidence of psychosis. Now, if they're having psychosis, they don't have dysthymic disorder. The symptoms that they're experiencing do not come from a medication or a substance or a general medical condition. But the symptoms do cause them a lot of significant distress and impairment in their social and or their occupational settings. We will start back tomorrow evening when I get here on the biological theories.